Hey, good afternoon to you. It's now 5:07, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. There's a new major political figure today, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, joining Kamala Harris's crazy ticket. The two of them running as the most radical presidential ticket in American history. Here is ABC rejoicing and saying Tim Walz, he's going to convince those dopes all across the country to vote for Kamala.
All-American definition of a man from middle America, high school teacher, football coach, member of the Army National Guard before becoming a member of Congress and now governor.
Exactly. He really has that perfect backstory. He also has those rural roots, and he's really emerged as the dark horse in this Veep Stakes race. He has emerged as the favorite very recently as he has been on the cables, on the network, showing that he can effectively push back on those Republican attacks. He's the one, George, remember, who labeled J.D. Vance and his Republican allies as, quote, weird, which gained a lot of steam with the Harris campaign. He has this folksy, personal, informal vibe that has really appealed to a lot of Democrats, and they believe that his rural backstory, the fact that he was a former member of the NRA, as you say, he is this former high school teacher, he was a football coach, that this can help appeal to those independent swing state voters.
Holy cow. A perfect backstory, says the incredulous left-wing reporter. She has no interest whatsoever in, his DUI, driving 100 miles per hour, hammered and getting busted by the cops, or the fact that he apparently decided to retire from the National Guard because he found out he was being deployed to Iraq, and his fellow troops are all ticked off at him for it, calling his lies about his time in the National Guard, quote, stolen valor. For more on all of this, I want to turn to the Media Research Center's president now, Brent Bozell, who joins us on the phone. Brent, great to have you back with us, sir.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I should also point out Brent is the chairman of For America. And, hey, Brent, that's just an example of the news coverage today. And I noticed that ABC reporter used the same exact adjective a ton of these outlets are using, folksy. Everybody's calling Tim Walz folksy. How did that happen, Brent?
Yeah, well, it's a vast echo chamber. It's like the idea that Trump was anti-democracy. Where in the world did that come from? They just started talking about it, and they picked it up, and everybody all of a sudden was running on the theme that he's anti-democracy. This is how they work. But look, there's so many people who are coming out today and saying that not only is he a moderate, but don't believe your lying eyes when conservatives tell you otherwise. The best quote I found is ABC News contributor Amanda Renteria. Quote, he's a centrist. To say he's more liberal than Vice President Harris or the most liberal congressman, which I'm sure we're going to hear, is just not true. Now, if you give me just a second, you folks out there decide how moderate this is. On gender wars, he is for turning his state into a transgender sanctuary state where the state has the right to take away a child from the parents if the parents don't agree to gender-changing surgery. On economic policy, he wanted to increase the gas tax by 70%. He supported Build Back Better, $2.2 trillion, the American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion, and the Inflation Reduction Act, $800 billion. He wanted to turn Minnesota into an immigration sanctuary state, giving illegals driver's licenses, in-state college tuition, free health care, and the like. On abortion, he wants abortion, and he signed the law, abortion for any reason at any time in Minnesota, including infanticide, where if a baby is born from a botched abortion, you don't touch the baby, you let the baby die. Public safety, his daughter openly helped the rioters in Minnesota by giving them positions of where the police were going during the riots. He supports the assault weapons ban. On climate change, he wants to make Minnesota 100% electricity by 2040, supporting California's incredible vehicle emission standards. And finally, on religion, he banned, during the pandemic, he banned churches from opening if there were more than 10 members, and then opened casinos and the mall in Minneapolis before he would allow churches to open.
Yeah.
Now, folks, Is that the beliefs of a moderate, or are we looking at the most radical ticket in the history of the republic? And that's all there's to it. This is the most radical ticket in the history of the republic.
Yeah, and Tim Walz also launched a Soviet snitch line during the COVID shutdowns and said, if you see anybody going to church, contact this number and report them so that the authorities can stop them. That was the Tim Walz of the pandemic. And now all this effort to erase that, I don't think it's going to work all that well, because there are plenty of places, to include X, to include Newsbusters, to include WMAL, where people can get real information about who this guy really is.
I think so. In 2020, you did have the kind of censorship that took place where, for example, Democrats didn't know about Hunter Biden. Had they known, Joe Biden would not be president, period, full stop on that statement. But you do have, I think, it is so much more radical even than Joe Biden. These people can't help themselves. She is pretending to be a moderate right now. I don't think it's going to sell. I think this is still Donald Trump's to lose if he runs this campaign correctly.
Let me ask you a little bit about the strategy here in terms of getting Kamala Harris to answer some damn questions, because I think that's really important. I've been saying since the beginning of her campaign that the critical element here is they need to get her off script. Just literally, even a friendly interview is a disaster for her. Will there be a breaking point for the media where they say, hey, we haven't had a single interview with this woman, we're entitled to one? Will their egos be big enough to force her out?
Yes, they'll be big enough, because they will do anything to stop Donald Trump from getting reelected, including suggesting that maybe a bullet didn't hit him. They are capable of saying and doing anything to prevent him from being president, including swallowing their pride and allowing her. She hasn't done any press conferences. She hasn't made herself available to the press since she was elected. Nobody voted for her out there. She was coronated, and she's going to try a basement strategy. But I think, I think a big turning point in this is Elon Musk opening up X for a conversation. I think that could be a big game changer.
Yeah, in fact, on that front, I know that at the Media Research Center, you follow all of the tech censorship really closely. And I saw today that Elon Musk and X are now launching lawsuits against all of the boycott firms that the left runs all around the planet to basically shut down the revenue streams for places like X, which allow open conversations. And so that's a big deal and a new front in this important war.
Oh, yeah. Then just once you get to discovery and once you find out what is actually going on, I think the public is going to be horrified. The degree to which a group of people have been deciding winners and losers as to what company will stay afloat, that it has to have the right political narrative or they'll put it out of business. And you're going to see that they've been doing it all over the world. It's going to be shocking. Just mark my words. It's going to be shocking.
I'm marking your words. It's a really important topic, and I totally agree with you. I think discovery is going to be very fruitful for those of us who care about free speech and getting this country back on track. Let me go back to the Tim Walz pick today and some of the other media reaction. I've got a piece of audio here from CNN's Van Jones saying something deeply uncomfortable today about why the left chose Tim Walz and not Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. Take a listen to his assessment here.
Conservatives, the right wing, the Republicans, they were chewing their fingernails down to the knuckle because they were afraid of a Josh Shapiro. They were afraid of a Mark Kelly. They're not as afraid of this new governor because they think they can define him. So here's the challenge you've got in this party. And people don't want to talk about it. We got to talk about it. On the one hand, you have a lot of young people who are concerned about Gaza. You have a lot of Muslims and Arabs and others. They have not felt seen by the Biden administration. You start hearing that genocide joke. That was building. And so those folks needed to have a candidate that they could feel comfortable with. This helps them in that regard. But you also have anti-Semitism that has gotten marbled into this party. You can be for the Palestinians without being an anti-Jewish bigot, but there are some anti-Jewish bigots out there. And there's some disquiet now, and there has to be. How much of what just happened is caving into some of these darker parts in the party. So that's going to have to get worked out.
So here you have a Democrat in good standing, CNN's Van Jones, admitting out loud that anti-Semitism is running roughshod all over his party. Brent Bozell, what do you make of that admission and the role that it's playing in their politics?
Well, let's start by first asking, what in the world does this have to do with Republicans biting their fingernails to the bone? This is the Democrats who've got the problem. This is a fantastic opportunity for Republicans to reach out to the Jewish community and bring them over for once and for all. No, this is a horror show. Look what Shapiro was doing. He was apologizing for having been a supporter of Israel, and he's Jewish. He's apologizing for that. He kind of reminds me of Democrats in the 80s and 90s who had been pro-life, apologizing for having been pro-life. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Al Gore, they all apologized for having been pro-life. This is the kind of intolerance on the left that they make you run through those hoops. And if you're not 100% acceptable, they throw you off to the side. I think Shapiro would have been a good choice. I think he would have been the smart choice. This guy is such an ideologue. He's such a bomb thrower that I think is going to catch up to him.
Yeah, and it's crazy. You know, I can't tell you the number of headlines I've seen in the past few weeks acting like it's totally normal that the left is anti-Semitic. They were like, well, you know, this could be a real problem if they choose Shapiro because, you know, lots of Democrats don't like Jews. And you're like, what? Wait, everyone's saying if all of this was reversed, if we were talking about Republicans rejecting a Jewish running mate, what kind of news cycle would we be served with, Brent Bozell?
Wait. Yeah, well, watch what happens when Iran attacks Israel. Watch the media coverage of it. It's going to be immediate, kind of hard news. The attack is coming. The war has started. But then immediately it's going to go into, mark my words on this one too, it's Israel's fault. Israel had it coming to them because they started it.
Yeah, and why won't Israel stop fighting back? What's wrong with them? We got a lot of that. Brent Bozell, thank you from the Media Research Center. Always good to talk to you, sir. Okay, let's go to the phones. I've got Mike calling in from Sunshine, line 1. Hello, Mike. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Vince, thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
Van Jones is not correct. The anti-Semitism is not marbled into the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has a voting bloc that is very anti-Semitic, very loud, and very aggressive, dare I say violent. So it's the heckler's veto. That's why Shapiro is not the vice presidential candidate. Now, as far as Kelly is concerned, there were a lot of powers that be that really liked Kelly. I think they're telling him to, sit this one out, keep your powder dry for 2024. Why be part of a potentially losing campaign? That's my thought.
I guess, there's a lot of ways to think about this, and they, we'll know a lot more after the election for sure about what this all means. But one way to think about it that I've seen a lot of people claim is like, look, Democrats have kind of chalked up this election to a loss to begin with for the presidential. Yes, they will do their best to meddle. Yes, they will do their best to manipulate and censor, no question. But that there is some thought that maybe we just have to staunch the bleeding, that Democrats have to hold on to as much power as they can in the House and the Senate. The calculus seems to be that they're only going to do a base turnout election. They're going to get the most radical fringe elements of their party to turn out. To hell with the people in the middle. Mark Kelly, I got a text from somebody who very much is in the know today on the right, who said to me, there must be something super dark in Mark Kelly's past that we're not aware of right now, that they may have come across in this vetting process, because Mark Kelly, that's the astronaut. That's the guy. His wife is Gabby Giffords. He's Arizona's favorite son. All of these things. In an important battleground state, they bypass this guy. There's a reason for that, Mike. Your suspicion is that that maybe they're saying, "Hey, cool your heels until 2028." Maybe Mark said that. Maybe Mark's position is, "I want no part of this. I'm cooling off until 2028." But there's definitely a lot of intrigue around them passing over Mark Kelly.
Correct. I think Obama wasn't Kelly Obama's kind of pick over Kamala, and I think that he does have some China. Shadow, right? He's got a business that he's been involved with China. So that
he was involved in a Chinese spy balloon company. Speaking of Chinese spy balloons, so that is a big deal. But the kind of thing that normally that wouldn't stop a Kamala Harris campaign. If there was something that came up in their Oppo research and their sort of in preparation, There may have been something far worse than even that, and that's bad enough, don't you think?
I would think so, but we'll see.
Yeah, we will see. Well, we're all watching it really closely. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. And on this issue, what Van Jones said, I think when he says it's marbled in, there's a lot of marbling. This is a big old ribeye with tons of marbling of anti-Semitism. No, ribeyes are so good. I hate to use that as an analogy, but that's what he's referencing, being marbled in, this idea. There's lots of anti-Semitism on the left. Van Jones admitted today on CNN, and we've got to reckon with that. Nobody wants to talk about it, but we have to reckon with it. They're not going to reckon with it. I hate to tell you, Van Jones, it's not going to. There's no reckoning involved here. That's not going to happen. Meanwhile, we also have other Van Jones audio. What else did he say today? Oh, he said it's not good that Republicans are kind of pumped about Tim Walz being the running mate. Take a listen to this.
What worries me is you see a lot of relief from the conservatives. They were scared of Josh Shapiro. They were scared of a Mark Kelly. They thought that would help define Kamala more to the middle. You see a lot of rejoicing on. I don't
know anyone who was scared of those picks. As a tactical matter, you do level concern. You're like, well, these are important battleground states: Arizona, Pennsylvania. But scared, fearful? I don't really think so. I think in the end, these are all varying shades of radical, and either way. But they did really go with one of the most florid radicals in their entire party, Tim Walz. That really is true.
That's not good. Also, you've got some disquiet in the Jewish community. Some people had their hopes up. Maybe you're going to get another shot at a Jewish vice president. We haven't had that for 2 decades, and now that gets pulled away. Is it just because he's a moderate, or is there some anti-Jewish bias here?
Who's a moderate? Who's a moderate? Who's he talking about? Surely it wasn't Tim Walz he was referencing. Huh. That's crazy. Your call's coming up, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Tim Walz accused of stolen valor by some of the people he served with in the National Guard. Details ahead. Hey, good afternoon to you. 535 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. In a moment, I'll get into some more information about Tim Walz and how former members of the National Guard who served alongside him say that, well, they accuse him of being a coward, and for a very important reason. I'll share that with you in a moment. But before I get there, breaking news this afternoon. The Biden Justice Department has released information, according to the New York Times, saying they have charged a Pakistani man who recently spent 2 weeks in Iran with trying to hire a hitman to assassinate political figures in the United States. That's the lead sentence. Now, ready for the next? Investigators believe that potential targets likely included former President Donald J. Trump, according to a senior law enforcement official. There you go. The man, Asif Rasa Merchant, 46, was arrested in New York on July 12th, the day before a 20-year-old man, Matthew Crooks, shot at and slightly wounded Mr. Trump during a rally in Pennsylvania. Okay, let me pause for a second. The New York Times adding slightly wounded, rather than just saying wounded, slightly wounded Mr. Trump during a rally in Pennsylvania. They're upset that Trump was wounded because of it accrues political support to Trump's side, so they say he was slightly wounded. It's like describing a riot as mostly peaceful. Trump was slightly wounded, the New York Times says today, during a rally in Pennsylvania, according to a criminal complaint unsealed in federal court in Brooklyn on Tuesday. Officials said they had no evidence indicating the plot was connected to the shooting in Pennsylvania, but they said the arrest of Mr. Merchant allowed them to disrupt what they characterized as a far-ranging plot that also included stealing computer files from U.S. officials. It also included staging protests against American treatment of Muslim countries. U.S. intelligence agencies were tracking a potential Iranian assassination plot against Mr. Trump in the weeks before the assassination attempt that prompted the Secret Service to enhance security for the former president before his outdoor campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. It's not clear if the scheme made public on Tuesday precipitated those moves. Well, if they arrested him the day before the shooting, one would assume that the investigation was longer running into this guy. So, well, yes, that would precipitate those, quote, moves. But what moves were they exactly? Donald Trump was left completely unprotected from the shooter in Butler, Pennsylvania. Completely. The entire roof of that building was open up for that guy to shoot at Trump. The guy was walking around for minutes on top of it in a very obvious way, at least 3 minutes, in a very obvious way, and not prevented from shooting Donald Trump in the head. So spare us the enhanced security posture stories from the Secret Service because of the Iranian threat. Mr. Merchant, who is believed to be cooperating with investigators since his detention, quote, orchestrated a plot to assassinate U.S. government officials and steal information on U.S. soil, prosecutors wrote in documents unsealed on Tuesday. After spending time in Iran, Merchant flew from Pakistan to the U.S. to recruit hitmen to carry out his scheme, they said. So the Iranians here now trying to assassinate Trump, according to the Justice Department, although they really want to emphasize that it was just U.S. political figures that were being targeted, less so Trump. In fact, I'm seeing a tweet today, an X post today, from Chris Lacivita from the Trump campaign, and here's what he says just in the last hour. He wrote, "The weaponized DOJ, led by Attorney General Garland, just delivered a news dump of a second Iranian-funded assassination attempt of former President Trump. But instead of holding a press conference and naming President Trump as the intended target, they just said politician. In quotes, politician. The DOJ issued a bland press release hoping no one is paying attention. No doubt the line agents who prevented this attack are to be commended. The headquarters, however, should be questioned as to why this second attempt from the Iranian government doesn't deserve the same treatment as the first." So Chris Lacivita noting something very important here. The Justice Department is burping out this news today and downplaying that it was Donald Trump who's being targeted, that it's President Trump who's the subject of the Iranian assassination attempt, that this guy was coming fresh from Iran, was attempting to hire hitmen to kill Trump. And so if you need any more evidence whatsoever that the Justice Department acts in a political way, look no further than this. If you were the Attorney General of the United States and you thwarted the assassination of the leading candidate for president, wouldn't you want to have a press conference about that? Wouldn't you release a public statement to that effect? I'm here today to tell you that we stopped a presidential assassination attempt. That's my best Merrick Garland impersonation. But he didn't do that. No, they buried it in a press release, called the guy a politician, and went on their merry way. These are the actions of a politicized Justice Department, not one that wants Americans to have restored confidence in them. If they did, they'd be blaring this in a press conference. We just saved Trump. Heck, they have every incentive in the world to do that right now in light of the fact that the Biden administration almost allowed Trump to be killed just weeks ago. Now's their opportunity. Save some face. Come out and say, hey, we stopped a follow-on assassination attempt. Nothing. We get a press release that says they helped save a politician. That's it. So that's the update today. Again, breaking news on that front out of the Biden Justice Department, as highly politicized as ever. And that's just gross. Okay. Meanwhile, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, he at one point was a member of the National Guard, and he likes using it in all of his political campaigns. Really emphasizing that point. But he's not really telling you the full truth for any number of reasons. Let me begin with a piece that was written by a couple of members of the National Guard in a publication called the West Central Tribune back in 2018. And the piece is called The Truth About Tim Walz. The Truth About Tim Walz. And the writers here, they set out there very early in this piece their credibility here. They are retired command sergeants major from the Minnesota National Guard. And here's what they say. They say, Tim Walz has embellished and selectively omitted facts and circumstances of his military career for years. We, retired command sergeants major of the Minnesota National Guard, feel it is our duty and responsibility to bring forth as we know it, the truth as we know it concerning his service record. So we have put together a timeline of his service post 9/11 To the best of our knowledge, this information is completely true, having been verified by all those who served in positions with firsthand knowledge of the facts and circumstances of his service and departure from the Minnesota National Guard. Many of the dates and timeframes are from his official discharge document and the reduction order reducing him to Master Sergeant. In other words, he was demoted. On September 18th of 2001, Tim Walz re-enlisted in the Minnesota Army National Guard for 6 years. In early 2003, he was selected to attend the U.S. Army Sergeant's Major Academy. The non-resident course consists of 2 years of correspondence coursework, followed by a 2-week resident phase at Fort Bliss, Texas. When a senior non-commissioned officer accepts enrollment in the course, they accept 3 stipulations. First, they'll serve for 2 years after graduation from the academy, or promotion to Sergeant Major or Command Sergeant Major, whichever's later. Second, if they fail the course, they may be separated from the military. Third, they will complete the course or be reduced to Master Sergeant without board action. Senior non-commissioned officers initial and sign a statement of agreement and certification upon enrollment. The State Command Sergeant Major or Army National Guard Command Sergeant Major counsels the soldier and certifies that the senior NCO understands their responsibilities. These stipulations are put in place because the academy is a college-level school. The military invests a lot of taxpayer money in the student. The military needs to be ensured that they will get the return on investment that the taxpayers deserve. So in late summer of 2003, First Sergeant Walz deployed with forgive me for getting this numbering, naming wrong, but the first 125th Field Artillery Battalion, I think that's how you say it, in support of Operation Enduring Freedom to Italy. The mission was to augment U.S. Air Force Europe security forces doing base security for 6 months. In no way were the units or the soldiers replacing any units or military forces so they could deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan. After the units returned to Minnesota in the spring of 2004, he was selected by high-level Command Sergeant Major to serve in the position of the Command Sergeant Major of that Field Artillery Battalion. On August 5th of 2004, he was photographed holding a sign at a protest outside of a President Bush campaign rally in southern Minnesota. On September 17th, 2004, he was conditionally promoted to Command Sergeant Major. The conditions had been outlined to him when he was counseled, and he signed the statement of agreement. If the conditions are not met, the promotion is null and void, like it never happened. In early 2005, a warning order was issued to the battalion, which included the position he was serving in, to prepare to be mobilized for active duty for a deployment to Iraq. On May 16th, 2005, he quit. He left the battalion and its soldiers hanging, without its senior non-commissioned officer, as the battalion prepared for war. His excuse to other leaders was that he needed to retire in order to run for Congress, which is false. According to a Department of Defense directive, he could have run and requested permission from the Secretary of Defense before entering active duty, as many reservists have. If he had retired normally and respectfully, you would think he would have ensured his retirement documents were correctly filled out and signed, and that he would have ensured he was reduced to Master Sergeant for dropping out of the academy. Instead, he waited for the paperwork to catch up to him. His official retirement document states, "Soldier not available for signature." On September 10th, 2005, conditionally promoted Command Sergeant Major Walz was reduced to Master Sergeant. It took a while for the system to catch up to him, as it was uncharted territory. Literally no one quits in the position he was in or drops out of the academy except him. So here you have these guys, retired Command Sergeants Major of the Minnesota National Guard, saying this guy was demoted and he jumped out before he was deployed to Iraq. Literally no one in his position would do this, as they say, except for him. Now, this is not the only coverage of this. In fact, let's see, I've got the dates here in front of me. Back in 2022, so 2 years ago now, there were a number of Guardsmen who replaced Walz, one of them who replaced Walz, who trashed him for abandoning his troops. I want you to take a listen here. This is some of the audio of this piece. This was done by Alpha News in Minnesota. Alpha News in Minnesota. They ended up doing a big piece on how this guy skipped out on his troops Let's see here. Take a listen to this. I'm pulling this up for you now. I want to make sure you can get a chance to hear some of this. Here it is.
The public needs to know how pathetic his leadership was as a National Guardsman.
On a 150-year-old farm in Brewster, Tom Behrens hopes his tell-it-like-it-is style will finally get the attention he believes it deserves in Minnesota's race for governor. In a way, he's back again to wage a public war of words against Tim Walz.
He abandoned us, I mean, what the hell kind of leader does that? I mean, he just, as soon as the shots were fired in Iraq, he turned and ran the other way and hung his hat up and quit.
We'll get to Behrens' new message for voters in a moment. But this all starts years earlier when Behrens says Walz's misleading statements about his military service first led him to come forward in the fall of 2018.
So you try to get this message out, but Minnesota's largest newspaper checks it out, says it's 100% true, but yet refuses to print.
When I hung the phone up, I said, what the hell is this, North Korea?
Back in 2005, a warning order went out to the 1st Battalion, 125th Field Artillery to mobilize for a mission to Iraq. At the time, Walz served as the unit's highest non-commissioned officer, but months later, Walz would retire from the Guard, avoid the deployment, and run for Congress. Tom Behrens was next in line for the position and was asked to take his place.
I was like, well, for Pete's sake, if this guy quit, and if I say I'm not going to do it, I mean, what the hell kind of leadership is that? If a company would say that we're going to deploy to Iraq or somewhere and you're going to be gone for whatever amount of time, and then a foreman just says, no, I'm not going. I mean, what does that say to the 500 people that work in that factory?
Behrens would go on to serve in Iraq on a nearly 2-year deployment as a command sergeant major. All while Walz began using that title as a congressman. Behrens says he first contacted Walz with his concerns, sending these letters to Washington. They all went unanswered.
But then we fast forward to the election in 2018 in Minnesota, and you try at that time to get people's attention with this story and also with what seems to be a very misleading statement that he continued to make about his service.
It kind of just sat there, when he was a congressman, he bragged that he was a retired command sergeant major. I'm the highest ranking person ever in the House, and all this lie that he was telling. The state of Minnesota came out after 2018, after this was exposed, and they said, well, he can say that he served as a command sergeant major, but he can't say he's a retired one because he's not.
And that's what he was saying.
And he was saying that, and there was lots of lots of cards coming in the mail, for him to be elected. They said right on there he's a retired command sergeant major, just tooting his own horn, just hanging on the coattails of people that actually are command sergeant majors that went through all the process and put all the time in.
A spokesperson for the Minnesota National Guard said Walz wasn't able to retire as a command sergeant major since he failed to complete coursework and requirements related to the rank. Verified documents show the Army corrected his service record. Walz was reduced in rank to an E8 Master Sergeant after retirement and his conditional promotion. Alpha News again asked Governor Walz if he's using the command sergeant major rank on his campaign website for political gain this year. A spokesperson said this has been in the news before and pointed us to a past story where Walz said, quote, normally this type of partisan political attack only comes from one who's never worn a uniform.
It's stolen valor is really what it is.
Amazing. Just amazing. Now this guy's the running mate. But, he probably identifies as a command sergeant major, so maybe that works. Maybe that works. His successor, who wasn't, who just stepped up to the plate. He says this guy's guilty of stolen valor. It's fine. Let's go to the phones. I've got Chuck calling in for Virginia, line 1. Chuck, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. So I did 24 years in the Army, and one thing I know about is training and education, and, not only did he steal valor from the position that he claims to have had, this is Tim Walz, but he also took that school slot from someone else. And although they'll have a backup person to go in the school slot, who's to say it's the person that was supposed to get it to begin with? So there's more than there's more than stolen valor here. There's administrative falsification and other people being harmed by what he did.
So this sounds to me, if I'm putting all the pieces together, and I am, that he joined the National Guard as merely a box-checking exercise for his political ambitions, and he didn't want to deploy at all. So as soon as the prospect for that came up, he ducked and got out. and then he kept trying to use the title that he didn't actually earn in the end.
Yeah, that sounds like a reasonable assessment.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, thank you for your service, Chuck. I appreciate that. And that's an excellent point.
Thank you.
He stole spaces that other people could have had. Let's see here. Rick calling in from Georgia now, line 2. Rick, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Yes, sir. Thanks for taking my call, and I'm a great fan. Love you, man.
Thanks very much.
As a Navy veteran, I was one of the youngest guys to fly in the backseat of an F-14. I can say that Cammie's pick for vice president should get along very well with the current Department of Defense management.
Yeah, it's all going downhill, and he would fit in perfectly there. Rick, thank you very much for your service, your time today, and your call. It's always great to talk to the great WMAL audience all across the country. Stay with us. The great one, Mark Levin, up next here on WMAL.